Mark Daly in Richmond for Paralyzed Veterans of America News Online, and you know what? It's that time again for the presentation of the Barrier Free America Award. This year going to actually a very interesting idea, and to tell us a bit more about it would be someone who's no stranger to making America more barrier-free, and that would be the Executive Director of Paralyzed Veterans of America, Homer Townsend. Homer, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty good, Mark. How are you?
Let me just go over and put this mic in front of you so that we get you into the shot properly. There you go.
I'm taking over.
There we are. Well, as we always joke, Homer and I have the perfect faces for radio, right? So this video podcast is a little bit...
And the same physical fitness trainers.
Tell me how important and how special this award is, Homer, from Paralyzed Veterans of America's point of view.
You know, I couldn't think of a better recipients for this award. It blends in nicely with what PVA is all about. PVA is a veteran service organization that thinks outside the box. You know, when we have somebody tell us we can't do something, that's when we get our dander up. That's when we really get our dander up. So I imagine a lot of people told you guys, you can't do this. And then you were eventually able to prove them wrong and do things outside the box. So I couldn't think of anybody better to receive the award this year, Mark.
Well, now tell me, Homer, of course, let's just say immediately to the viewers who are watching this video podcast, what it is, because we talked about something that we haven't named yet. What is this we're awarding this year?
Well, the company has a unique concept about accessible tree houses, and that is just incredible. There are certain aspects of the world that people believe that people with disabilities shouldn't have access to, and this kind of thinking allows for disabled people to get into a treehouse and to do those kind of things that never was thought of before. Kind of like I said, the mission of PVA. People tell us we can't do something, we just have to prove them wrong.
Well, on that note, let's turn to someone who poured over a lot of potential awardees this year before we actually go to our chapter leaders and also the awardees this year. Mark Lichter, who is the director of PVA Architecture. Mark and his team works on accessibility issues all over America in all different sectors. Mark, this must have been a difficult choice because presumably there was a lot of potential winners this year.
Well, we had several nominations, yes, but this project really stood out. It really said to me that people can push the envelope of accessibility and think, as Homer said, outside the box. And we think it's a terrific example of how architects ought to be thinking with a higher bar.
Well, tell me, how is this treehouse accessible? What was it that makes it so special for people who might be using it?
Well, it has a very gradual slope. It's way beyond the minimum of building codes. It is very inclusive. Everybody takes the same path. And it's just a family-friendly place.
And on that note, let's turn to one of our chapter leaders, and that will be Terry Labar. Terry, like Homer, you're a Marine Corps veteran and Vice President of the Virginia Mid-Atlantic Paralyzed Veterans of America chapter. What is it like to have the winner of this very prestigious Universal Access Award right here, more or less in your garden, in this instance your botanical gardens here at the Ginter Botanical Gardens in Richmond?
I think it's a great asset not only for the Richmond and the surrounding area, but for people that come here from all over the country are going to look at this and say, this is an incredible feat, because you think of tree houses and accessibility as a contradiction in terms, as we mentioned earlier. But I just think that to have this in this area, it's going to reach out to people not only with disabilities, but with the aging population. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to have access to this that would never otherwise have that. And as I've always said, these people have gone above and beyond, and it's not that people with disabilities want special consideration or special treatment. They just want the same opportunities as everyone else. And fortunately, the botanical gardens and the architects have seen that and are giving those people with disabilities the same opportunity, not any special consideration.
Well, Let's give some special attention to our winners this year, shall we, for a second, because I'm looking at two gentlemen. The first one is the named recipient of the Barrier Free America Award this year. It would be, now, he'll probably tell this story, so I better not let the cat out of the bag, but his name is James Beefer Roth. So, James, I have to ask you, how did you get the nickname? It's more than a nickname, Beefer.
Just a real naive childhood miscommunication with my father, who would call me James B for Burton Roth, and I didn't know any better, and I told him I didn't like the Beefer part of my names, and he laughed at me, heartily he laughed at me and said, no, I mean B for Burton, like A for Apple, you knucklehead, and now it is your name. So it stuck. That's all.
So you didn't quite turn out like a knucklehead, because you went on to actually be heavily involved, intimately involved, in the creation of not only this accessible treehouse here at the Ginter Botanical Gardens, but apparently more than 30 of them around the country, right?
That's true. Yeah, we're up to 18 states now, 30 plus projects, and the whole crux of our mission is just to create access to a space that is all about childhood. To be a kid, to be in a treehouse, it's bread and butter. It goes hand in hand. To be a kid who has mobility issues and can't climb a tree, you're sitting there left out looking up the tree without access. So what we've done is provided a way for everybody to get up into a tree, and not only, and thinking about kids, the multi-generational part, even if it's an elderly person who is walking, not in a chair, but is walking, but with difficulty, they can get up into a treehouse too and relive their childhood. So to enable people to have that experience with whatever levels of mobility issues, I just can't tell you enough what a joyous experience that is to create that experience for everybody.
Well, now, what does it feel like to get this award from Paralyzed Veterans of America?
It's quite amazing. I mean, I didn't see it coming, and when the phone call came in from Paralyzed Veterans of America, I was just really, really honored and quite excited to know that for all our years of now, 11 years now, of making the effort of creating these spaces, someone out there really caught on. Well, a lot of people have caught on to it and have appreciated, but a group of this who's already doing so many good things in the realm of universal accessibility, for them to recognize us and say, we want you to be this year's recipient, it's quite outstanding. I'm pretty touched. Absolutely.
Well, we're delighted that you won, and congratulations. And of course, your partner in this accessibility. Your partner. I was going to say John the Knuckles Connell. But that's a lie, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, John Connell, AIA, who is the architect behind this marvelous beacon of accessibility. Who would have thunk it? An accessible treehouse. John, how did you end up getting involved in this project?
Well, I mean, I think I've been successful in solving a lot of problems that were non-standard problems, so that when Bill Allen, who came up with the idea originally, was casting around for somebody who could design and build something that was universally accessed, my name came up. What I think is most powerful about what's happened subsequently is that it could have just been a stunt. It could have been one amazing treehouse that was pulled off. But what Beefer and his crew have done is demonstrated that it's not a stunt. It's something which can be replicated over and over again, that you can have this universal access, that what formerly seemed like an impossibly high bar, almost a ludicrous concept, could become part of the normal landscape. And for that reason, I think it's probably why it's a powerful talisman for where universal access and architectural design is going.
Well, I know that well, let's see. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a flavor of this gentleman's resume, the thing I found interesting in the first couple of lines of it was, get this, he studied chemistry, then he studied fine art, and then he went to Yale and did an architecture degree. And he mixed that all together to produce these marvelous designs that have a touch of the I think Dr. Seuss about them. And when I was looking at it, I was thinking, where did that all come from? And then for you nailed it, didn't you, last night at dinner when you told me that was one of your influences, right?
I don't know how many architects might reply with the answer, who's your favorite favorite architect, or who's your inspiration? I don't know if Dr. Seuss is high on many architects' lists, but I can clarify. I'm a designer, not officially an architect. Dr. Seuss and Antonio Gaudi are like way up there for me. And why I say Dr. Seuss, just the whimsy, the wackiness, the real kind of wild, out of the box kind of way of looking at things. I'm not just talking about his rhymes, but all the buildings in his world are pretty wacky. And I think for the childlike whole premise, it fits together with the treehouse, with the Seuss-like, and some of the wood we've even named Dr. Seuss wood. The siding is like, it's just all about the childlike spirit, trying to keep that going.
John, I mean, you do have to sort of think. I suppose in other times and in other generations, people would have looked at you funny, wouldn't they, if you said, "Well, I'm going to do an accessible treehouse."
Oh, there's plenty of people around in this generation that will look at you funny if there's no short supply. But I just think that this is what's so exciting about this time, is that there's a new way of thinking about architecture generally. Just like, say, 30 years ago, people started to reconfigure houses to collect solar, because they call them solar houses, and they had these rakish angles, and they could explain them by saying, oh, well, yeah, these are solar homes. Now we are at a time when people are starting to realize that universal access is not a code challenge. It's the way it's really the first point of departure for designing a house or a building or a landscape that has way more power because it includes more people. So I think you're going to find fewer and fewer people are going to be amazed, and more people are going to say, that's a great universal design, whatever it is.
Tell me, what is your message as an architect who works in this area, who's taught in this area, who's thought about this area, who proves that the sky is literally the limit when it comes to accessible design? What is your message to other designers and architects?
Well, the thing you have to remember, if you're in the building business at any level, but particularly architects, is that a building is only as successful as the number of people who experience it and use it. That's not the academics, that's the day-to-day use. And the more people you can get into a building and who can experience it, the more successful it is. If you are not embracing universal design and celebrating access and circulation right at the get-go, you've lost immediately a huge segment of your audience. It's like an artist deciding they were not going to use the full palette, or like a musician deciding that they weren't going to use the full octaves. You want to use everything you have, and universal access should be just absolutely step one.
Well, gentlemen, let's just say thanks. Terry Labar of the Virginia Mid-Atlantic chapter, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, John Connell, AIA, and of course Beaver Roth. Congratulations, Beaver. Homer Townsend, the Executive Director, who's been an advocate for accessibility for such a long time. And boy, did you ever think you'd ever see an accessible treehouse, Homer?
No, look, years ago, necessity sometimes is the mother of invention, as you guys know. Years ago, when I first got injured, I moved back to Maine, where I'm from. And my friends got together and they set up a block and tackle system so I could go out and get on a deer stand.
Oh, great.
Good idea. They decided not to test it.
Yeah, the concept was good, but the engineering was
I went up, hand cranking my way all the way up, about 15 feet above the ground. When I went to come back, it all kind of let loose on me. but I mean, that a lot of times necessity is where things get done. The hand controls that people drive with were created not to drive automobiles, but when guys come back after World War II, they could get on the farm equipment and be able to use that. That's the kind of outside the box thinking that I talk about all the time. When people say to PVA, gee, we wish we could do that, we come back, have a meeting, and say, why can't we? I mean, what's the real reason we can't do this?
Right.
And that's what's held our organization in such high esteem for all these years, because we're not the largest. We do a certain segment. It isn't the most populous, but the people with the disabilities are the ones that really need our help. And so we deal with access in almost everything that we do. So to have our architects on staff, which, by the way, we're the only veteran service organization that has architects on staff. So.
And speaking of which, let's give the last word to the architect. of this particular celebration today, Mark Lichter. Mark, literally and metaphorically, of course, an architect in this instance. Mark, what is your message to folks out there who may be learning about accessibility for the first time and why it's important? Let's say I'm an architect and somewhere in Maine, where Homer's from, or Vermont, or wherever it might be, somewhere else in Virginia. What can that person do?
I think the most important message to get out of this is that accessibility shouldn't be an afterthought in your design. It needs to be a holistic approach from the early programming, the early planning of the project. It's going to lead to the most successful project and the most inclusive for all people. Universal access is a civil right. It doesn't have to ruin your design. There's plenty of beautiful buildings that are universally accessible.
And if we want to find out a little bit more about Paralyzed Veterans Architecture Program, where do you go for that?
Come to pva.org and click on architecture, and we have lots of information for you, both resources and more about what we do.
Mark, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.